Hello and welcome to Full Disclosure, a podcast project conceived entirely to let me spend more time with interesting people than I would ever get to do on the radio. Jordan Stevens, welcome.
Hi.
Musician, actor, author, bon vivant, wrestling bon vivant.
Sure.
Raconteur.
Okay.
Also considerably younger than the average guest on Full Disclosure.
No way.
Yeah.
Okay.
But you have crammed an awful lot into your life, which is some of which is included in your new book. For people who don't recognise the name, half of Rizzle Kicks, I suppose, is your original claim to fame. But the new book, Avoidance, Drugs, Heartbreak and Dogs, barely touches upon the fact that you are, because I've read that you're back in the studio with Harley. You barely touch upon the things in the books that people would know you for. Well, why is that?
I think it was important for me to avoid mention of Rizzle Kicks, basically because what I wanted to engage with and investigate was my own relationship with grief. And, because of the position I'm in, and you hear the word memoir, and then you think about somebody who's had some kind of celebrity status, which kind of almost pains me to say, there are certain expectations that come with that. And this book isn't a tell-all. There's a reason why my face isn't on the cover. It is my attempt at breaking down my relationship with love and grief. Grief being an experience that every single human being should go through or will go through. And I really, I believe that a broken heart, when your heart breaks, the pain doesn't have a look at your average income or your place in the charts or how many records you sold. It doesn't care about that. Pain and grief is something that needs to be processed by everybody, and it connects everybody. And that's what I wanted to. I wanted to write a book that everybody can feel engaged with. Really, the only important aspect of my fame.
You don't like saying that word, do you?
Well, I mean,
you've had quite a while to get used to it.
Yeah, it has connotations. It does warp. It does warp ideas slightly.
Of course it does. But it's not. I mean, I don't know if there's imposter syndrome there, or you're thinking. Because, you're a pop star.
Yeah.
You've had hit records, countless hit records, been on massive tours. So it's not like you're using the word and then thinking, oh, am I allowed to use that word? You're thinking, I don't like that word much.
I feel a slight undercurrent of separation, which I'm resistant to.
Okay.
And that was something I was trying to, really and truly, all that provided me in this context was time and money, which in the context of heartbreak and grief can be
which is
hardcore.
A point that you make. Repeatedly, actually, because it's space, really. Time and money equals space, doesn't it? And choices. The number of doors that are in front of you multiplies according to how much time and space you have. We'll arrive at the book, which, as you say, isn't a memoir in any conventional sense. Just to clarify, in case I need to, when you talk about grief, it is a broken heart rather than a death.
Well, the catalyst is a broken heart.
Yes.
But the grief I have to deal with are actually.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's an exploration, really, and we will arrive at that because this is an exercise partly in memoir. This podcast, this is quite life and times, and your life sort of splits, doesn't it, between your childhood in North London and then the move in Neasden and then the move to Brighton. You write in a remarkable way. When you're writing prose, does it feel the same to you as when you're writing lyrics?
Well, not really.
It doesn't.
No, because there's more freedom. I don't have
different
to rhyme.
Muscles, different exercise. Yeah, so
I don't have to rhyme everything.
Tighter.
But sometimes I do accidentally rhyme.
I noticed that.
Yeah. Honestly, when I was younger and I was going through it a little bit more in the space where I was self-medicating, perhaps with black market ADHD medication and the like, I actually remember going through a phase where I couldn't not write and rhyme.
Yeah.
I literally, everything I thought of in my brain was connected through a multisyllabic rhyme scheme, which is wild to think of.
Yeah.
And one of the biggest moments of my recovery, the first year I went sober, I had writer's block for a whole year, which was terrifying. It really is, a true writer's block. And then when I started to get back into the swing of things, writing without the need for an aid, I suddenly realised that I didn't have to rhyme everything, and so my main barrier was the way my brain worked, which was that the sentence structures in my mind were a little unconventional, which it's reflected in the book.
That's why I asked the question, but I understand better now. That's so it is reflected in the book. It's not stream of consciousness. It's tight. It's tight writing, but it's not conventional. It's not. It is. I can hear your voice.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like my thing with reading, for example, I love reading. I struggle with reading because of my attention span, which is definitely a more popular thing these days with everything being so instant.
Better understood.
Yes. But I realised for me personally, it was a lot of the time it's commas. Like I'd read books and it could be the most beautiful articulate sentence in the world. If there's 5 commas, I'm somewhere else.
That's brilliant.
So
there aren't many commas in this book.
No, and honestly, one of the editors, we had a real sit down.
I just realised this.
Yeah, because I want to be into. For me, a full stop is like a cold water. You know, bang, bang, bang. I wanted to keep my own attention.
It's like on the old typewriters where you zing the thing back.
Literally that.
You got that thing of right. That's done next.
Yeah,
done
ding,
next,
ding,
done
ding,
next.
ding,
Yeah.
ding. Yeah.
That's
Sometimes in the middle of a sentence,
Yes, I know.
and that's literally just to. Yeah.
So when I mean, your parents weren't together. I mean, as far as I can tell,
No.
at all.
Not in my memory, no. I think that I was fortunate for them to be very close during my childhood. My mum maintained a good relationship with my dad, and I saw him, but I didn't live with him. But they weren't ever together, no.
But I guess in Neasden in the 90s, that didn't really mark you out as particularly different from other people around.
Yeah, the estate I grew up on, Coles Green Court, it was really what I would expect from a London estate.
Yeah.
Complete multitude of cultures and environments and home setups. There were a lot of mothers and children. There were some dads with problems, some mums with problems, but that's where we were. We were top floor.
There's an immediate consciousness of community early on in the book.
Yeah.
I presume you changed some of the names for sort of
of course.
Diplomatic reasons, but you feel it reads like someone who is plugged into a much bigger universe than the one represented by immediate family. You know your neighbours well. You know their trials, their tribulations.
Oh yeah, of course, and the muse. Yeah. Well, listen, one of the things that I'm now proud of is that. And being an only child is quite a unique experience.
Yeah.
Are you an only child?
No.
Oh, okay. I'm only realising how unique it is now as an adult, because there are some things that come as second nature. For example, to my girlfriend who had an older brother, and so I was very curious. That's what I was going to say. And I like that trait in a person. But it was almost verging on dangerous in my estate, because you get to a certain age in that environment, and someone asking questions a lot can become suspicious. But I asked a lot of questions. I watched a lot of people, and I still find people fascinating. So on my muse, whenever there was a new neighbour, when we'd moved to Hove, I'd find out about them. What do they do? What's their job? Where are you going? If I walk past me, I'd be like, what do you do? Where have you come from? You know what I mean?
What were you like at school?
Didn't like school. No
pressure from home, was there? From mum particularly?
No. My mum, very anti-authority. All my authority issues, I think I inherited from my mum. Actually, and my dad, who was coined the first black punk, apparently by Sound magazine in the 70s. So it's in my spirit to kind of push back against being forced to do things. But I'm competent. I had very high targets that I missed, but I missed to still a reasonably high level.
Okay.
But I didn't like it. I didn't like the constant changing between lessons. I struggled to concentrate. Had that same old, great potential. If only he could focus.
Runs through the book like a stick of rock, doesn't it? The ADHD. And through your life, although you wouldn't know that immediately. So how did it manifest itself? Did you notice that I can't concentrate as well as my classmates can? Would you
in school?
Yeah.
Of course. It's the impulsivity. It's the failure to regulate my energy levels. Thinking back also, because we didn't have much money. I was buying the most awful. I was buying just sugar-tastic food in the break, and I remember falling asleep in class. And then I'd have issues if a teacher tried to, improperly enforce their power upon me when I felt it wasn't just.
Sure.
And so I'd naturally get into some. I was never bad, but I struggled. If I wasn't interested, James, it would be like, you know what I mean?
Not there.
Well,
Well,
There's a lot of lessons.
You start entertaining yourself.
I really excelled outside of school.
Right.
Most of the things I achieved as a teenager, I achieved when I was able to work on my own at home. Coursework I was great at. Tests I was awful at. I entered every single competition I ever came across as a teenager. Anything, any discipline, any competition I saw, I'd enter it, and I won some of those competitions.
Like what?
Well, it's a whole other story, but I won a geography competition in year 9 that took me to some insane places. Like, it's a whole other side. Yeah, I mean, I can't even get into it. But I was 14. I ended up.
Well, you wrote an essay, or what was the?
I actually made a radio show.
Really?
Yeah, it was conveying the topic of climate change to my peers in a medium of my choice. I chose a radio show, and I ended up. Oh mate, it's mad. I ended up going to Switzerland, studying glaciers. I ended up getting rehired by DEFRA to go to Japan. It was insane. But this was all because I entered a competition, and at that time I was considered a naughty pupil.
And would your geography teacher have kind of done a double take when who's won this competition?
Yeah. I'm confident that I'm one of like 3 people who entered it in my school. Genuinely. Mr. Cambers, big legend. He was really supportive of me. He was very proud, and it might have been a shock to him, but again, I didn't really have many problems with Mr. Cambers because I found geography.
He engaged you. He didn't try and
he was passionate about
squeeze you into a space you didn't think you should be put into.
Yeah.
And
I really sensed that he had a passion for geography, and I liked geography. I enjoyed that lesson.
So I'm fascinated by the difference between intelligence and education.
Right.
And our society is blighted by the failure to understand the difference between intelligence and education. So you knew you were intelligent.
I had some metrics that I was, sharp, or
but also the feeling you got when you engaged in something like the geography competition was that's an intellectual exercise.
It is an intellectual exercise, but I actually, my overwhelming feeling was not one of oh, I'm bright. It was more like, wow, you can get really far from just blagging.
Right. Oh, okay.
because I didn't know much. I mean, I ended up knowing loads about the climate, but I just entered it because it seemed like a fun competition. And there was a moment actually where I had to deliver a talk in Japan. I mean, this is so surreal to talk about. I can't even get into it because it is honestly so wild that I don't talk about it much because it is so wild. But and I remember somebody saying like, oh man, you could really get into politics when you're older. Yeah. And James, I promise you, my feeling in my head was like, you've got no idea how little I've done to get here.
Right.
And I was next to kids who were already being, offered places at Harvard, and I just remember thinking, this is hilarious.
This is mad, because we were talking about this on the radio show literally today.
Yeah.
About the difference between what's the opposite of entitlement. So a public school educated person finds themselves in situations like that and thinks that it is their birthright.
Right.
This is absolutely what I'm supposed to be doing. Whereas you find yourself in a situation like that and you're thinking, this is insane. I'm going to get thrown out any minute now. And
Literally.
yet you'd be just as qualified as the...
I ended up so. I also took that memory from me, was knowing I'd gone in with a kind of scrappy idea of what the climate was, because I just wanted to enter the competition, and being left with this idea of, I was like, wow, I actually know quite a lot now.
I want to know more about this, but we can't.
It'll be another time. I know.
We'll do it again. We'll have to park that.
Complete side quest.
Park that and move on. So what were the big differences between Neasden and Hove? How did it change your life to move there? I should stress again that your relationship with your dad was always close, albeit that you didn't talk about the deep stuff. Very few lads do with their dads. It's something that you come back to again in the book.
Yeah. And also, actually, before we move on, I wanted to say this point because with intelligence, description. Brighton, who says this, he refers to intelligence as pattern recognition, which I love because it spreads across all disciplines. So I can think of carpentry or playing football, playing cricket. Do you know what I mean, the understanding of of when the bounce is. And then emotional intelligence is just recognizing someone else's patterns of behavior, my own patterns of behavior. Love that.
It's a great line, isn't it?
But yeah, sorry. So Neasden and Hove. Look, I moved into Hove. I think we were following my mum's mum, who was living in Brighton at the time, and I think there were some loose ideas that we wanted to be kind of around her, in her later years. But there was the sea. It didn't feel as intense, in terms of like police activity. So personally, for me, I felt like I was in Wonderland.
Right.
I thought it was really great and open and free. I later realised that there were other nuances to that experience, being a mixed race boy in that environment, just because there wasn't very diverse when I moved to Brighton and Hove. was very open-minded, but it wasn't that diverse. But
and that would kick in when you got to school, when you got to Blatchington Mill School.
My understanding of it didn't kick in.
Right.
It was my understanding of the implications really kicked in actually in my 20s when I started to really shift into identifying myself, whatever that means. And I realised, and I mentioned this in the book briefly, that I really wanted to have like green eye contact lenses when I was in school, and the cultural spaces I found myself in, I believe, was just an attempt to assimilate, which is natural, but that is what happens when you don't look like the people around you. You have to find ways in which to culturally assimilate that might be at the expense of maybe my authentic identity. I don't know.
But this is happening subconsciously.
Subconsciously, yeah. I definitely I thought I was having a fun time.
And secondary school was no better or worse than primary. I mean, school is not, you and school are not a good match.
So primary school, again, primary school was in Neasden, secondary school was in Brighton.
Yeah.
It was more the structure of secondary school where I felt, wow, hold on a second, I don't feel like I'm able to exercise my ambition here. I feel like I'm being bullied into conformity a little bit, I really actually believed for a long time that I reached kind of peak excitement and intelligence at 10, and then from that point onwards I was just kind of, I don't know, moulded into a confused square.
And it's hand in hand with a deep affection for attention.
Sure.
Which I think you've said first kicked in when you were 7 and you found yourself lip syncing to...
Yes, my mum is responsible for pushing me on to stage. Oh, well, that sounds harsh. My first stage performance was my Brent local talent competition, and I lip synced to Cisco, and I was terrified to go on stage. My mum said, once you go on, you won't want to come off, and lo and behold, 3.5 minutes later, I came back out of the closed curtains and started clapping the crowd. So,
what were you feeling?
I guess a sense of validation, excitement, and again, perhaps only child, I felt my only real way of engaging with new people and crowds was to be a clown, and maybe if people laughed or liked me, that kind of thing.
Talk a bit on the podcast about the look at me gene.
Yeah,
which you clearly have, but it's not necessarily the same as showing off, is it? It can sometimes be a bit subtler than that.
Yeah, I don't know. I definitely know that because of my mum's friends and my dad's friends growing up, I think the idea of performance wasn't alien to me. Yeah. So I'm definitely a product of my environment in that respect. Do you know what I mean? Because I'd maybe meet someone and they'd be on telly, or my godfather is an amazing singer and I'd see him singing. So it wasn't alien to me. And that definitely, you can obviously tell people who have been around that and people who haven't.
So what would ambition have looked like then by the time you were sort of 13, 14? Would you have any concept of what you were going to do when you got out of the education system?
I mean, maybe I have a warped memory for this, but I feel like I knew quite early on, end of year 8, year 9, I kind of knew that school wasn't really going to provide me with the platform I needed, just because everything I was drawn to, I felt my knowledge could be emboldened at home and through practice, experience, Yeah. Music was always an outlet. One of my first ever rap songs was a diss on my school form tutor. He was really annoying me. And I think the only point where it started to really kick in was knowing that my social ineptitude, I'd say, in my mid-teens, became a kind of power, because I didn't understand friendship for a long time. I thought that it didn't make any sense to me. If someone told me that they were just chilling out in a park after school, I honestly wouldn't understand why they were doing it. I thought it would make more sense for me to go home and learn how to design a website.
You mean people just sitting with each other?
Yeah. I really had quite a transactional concept of being, and then, so I thought, you know what I'll do? I'll work hard and I'll get my head down and I'll be ahead of all these lot because they're just chilling out in parks. You know what I mean? And that is what happened. I had a blind ambition, I was delusional.
You also wanted to help your mum financially, I think, didn't you? So what sort of things did you do?
Well, I mean, the thing with my mum was I realised she was actually doing she was studying to be a therapist. She is in my teens, which there was a lot of struggle, and my hormones kicked in, and my mum had installed in me that if someone told me what to do, I didn't have to do it, which unfortunately then reversed on her if she asked me to do some chores, and I'd be like, well, don't want to. But I did know what I could do, and that was get my head down and work at getting us out of this kind of financial cocoon we'd found ourselves in. And I did, and it came at the expense of my mum's well-being for a little bit. But I was so focused on it. I can't explain it. I was like, I'm gonna do it. What
were you doing? What?
Like I said, I was literally in my bedroom teaching myself how to design MySpaces, Bebos, and if anyone remembers Bebo, but
were you making money out of doing that?
I get a $5 a bit for,
sure.
But I was leveraging the MySpaces in other ways. I was offering to do MySpaces in exchange for, like, say, studio time or some music. I was using my paper round to pay for studio time as well and beats. It's just a hustle, man. It really was that old school method of knocking on doors, asking questions. I found some emails from me in like 2008, which are wild.
Go on.
Well, it's just like me just cold emailing for jobs, and like my idea of what could be enticing was just honestly totally delusional.
So this is intrinsic to the idea that you clocked that school wasn't going to give you what you wanted or what you needed. So there's quite an early consciousness of the adult world, of the post-educational world. There's no sort of prospect of going to university or anything like that. You want to get out there and you want to start earning as soon as you possibly can. But not earning for earning's sake. You want to be doing something that feeds your creative appetite.
Well, something again that my mum installed in me very early was creating for love, and money being a fortunate byproduct of that.
Okay. Which again is a double-edged sword, isn't it?
Yeah, a little bit. And to be honest, actually, I was looking forward to going to college. When I went to college, I was excited because I went to Brit School.
Yes.
Which is for those who sometimes I often find people are confused about this. It's a funded. It's not a private school. It's a public funded, government funded school.
Yeah.
And it's brilliant. It really is. And I focused in on my strand, and I was excited by that.
You'd had your ADHD, your first ADHD diagnosis by then. How did that come about?
It's just in school. I think it was kind of obvious, and you have to do a Connors report, which is a various people in my immediate life, like my school teachers, my parents, my whoever else, my friends, would have to fill out this form, and they kind of make an average assessment, and then I'm given things like CBT, as in cognitive behavioural therapy, counselling, and I didn't really care much about any of it. But
no medicine.
My mum refused the medicine. Yeah.
Did she? On her anti-establishment grounds? I
think she is resistant to the pharmaceutical industry. Yeah.
She's a bit ahead of the curve on that.
Maybe.
So, I'm a tiny bit confused about and obviously you're in a much better place now, but you paint a picture of a very self-assured young man.
Sure.
But also quite a chaotic one at the same time. And there's a couple of things you've said that speak of an unhappiness that I haven't really picked up on yet, about particularly when that diagnosis kicked in and you became another statistic, another young boy from a low-income, single-parent household who can't concentrate. So I don't know whether that's a retrospective acknowledgement of stigma or whether you really felt like that at the time. And you've also spoken about hating your ethnicity at around this stage in your life, partly for the reasons you've touched on.
The assimilation.
Feeling like you stuck out, feeling like you didn't fit in.
Well, just, again, it is all retrospective. Right. At the time, I wasn't aware of of the demographic that are particularly likely to get ADHD. Yeah. And like I say, I didn't see it as any hindrance to my existence at the time. I loved creating projects in my spare time so much. I didn't think ADHD was an issue because I didn't feel like school was necessary for me to achieve what I wanted to achieve. And again, the realization of how I viewed myself and being like a brown child in a overwhelmingly white environment. Again, I feel like it's so important, especially now more than ever, to be clear that it's not like an attempt at feeling hard done by or a victimized thing at all. I had a good time, but all of my early experiences of racism happened, when I was playing football matches, and I'd be playing, surrounding villages like Uckfield or Pease Pottage, and I would get people saying wild stuff to me, like it just is. The first time I was told to go back to my own country, I remember being like genuinely baffled. I wasn't upset. I didn't understand. Yeah. I didn't understand that concept of oh wow, like why did he think that? And it was always in the context of me I was good at football, so it's always in the context of somebody having felt humiliated by me, or that was a goalkeeper and I was a striker, so you do the maths there. Do you know what I mean? So it was always like, oh, this is what people say when they feel threatened by something I've done or my ability. So all I'm saying is, when I look back at that time, I can understand why it would have had a confusing effect on me. The N-word, the first 2 times that was said to me were by close friends. You know, close friends at a time of anger with me, that was used. And I remember thinking, well, you know, because in my head, that's pretty much the worst thing you can say.
Sure.
But that's just something that's part of I was like, okay, well, I guess people are saying that around here and thinking that's okay, because there's no one here really backing me. There's no understanding of...
What are you going to do?
Yeah. There's not much, you know, I'm not surrounded by people who who I share that you know, that cultural relationship with. So I guess the natural thing for a growing young man to do is think of what they can do to assimilate.
With the diagnosis in your pocket, it is off to the Brit school. You're friends with Harley by now. Yeah, I think that you both ended up in Brighton. Did you apply as a double act? Not literally, but I mean...
What, Brit school?
Yeah.
No, we didn't do music.
No, I know you didn't do music. Yeah. I don't mean did you apply as a double act as in what Rizzle Kicks would become. I meant did you apply together? Did you decide together to go there? Was the friendship by now quite tight or not? Yeah,
I think there was definitely... I think more him. Like, I think Harley was dead set on Brit because he was doing theatre and has a really great rep for theatre. And then I remember going to the induction day, meeting the principal and him being like, what are you interested in? And I was like, well, I like music, but I'm really into directing. I love writing and directing. And he went, go for that one. Because the demand in the music strand was so... I mean, if I didn't play 2 instruments, I wasn't going to get in.
Okay.
But I loved it. I really loved it.
Where did you live when you were doing that?
Brighton.
You'd commute.
Yeah.
It's not that far. I was just confused.
Kind of an hour door to door. Actually.
Yeah. No, fair enough. And now, did you find your tribe here, Jordan? Was there here a sense that and I mean culturally and creatively, did you finally think, oh, now I'm surrounded by people that speak the same language
as me? Yeah. I mean, I met my now best friend there, who I adore, on the first day. So, you know, I remember the real feeling that stuck with me, which would have happened again at university, which sometimes I do regret not experiencing, was I was a new person. There was really only 7 people from Brighton, I think, that were in strands separate to me.
Right.
So people were meeting me from me at that age, whereas I had kind of settled into being that kind of oddball, outcast, always at home, doing...
Peaked at 10.
Yeah. Doing websites in the dark as an only child,
so
and then suddenly
it's not a reinvention; it's a sort of
a little
blossoming.
Bit. A little bit.
Okay.
And so, and again, the beautiful thing about Brit is it's a BTEC diploma where you have one specialist subject in 18 units, and it's all roughly around the same topic, rather than 5 A levels, which might be taking you from one end of the world to the other, which would have really messed up my ability to focus.
And you're on the broadcasting and digital communication course, but your musical ambitions are now accelerating.
Yeah,
partly because of the environment you're in, even though you're not on that course. You're in a universe where anything is possible.
Anything's possible. Creative. I mean, one of my first projects was doing a music video, which was definitely to my own song, and I was spending a lot of time with Harley because we were getting the train together. Right. And then it was in these
funny little things, isn't it?
Yeah, literally
real little moments.
Yeah,
and so got the same train.
When I had this wave of, it would be really cool to have someone singing the end of my lines. I asked him. He was like, "Yeah, I'll do that." He has a great voice. And then the thing I remember most was uploading this song where Harley sung a verse, but it wasn't Rizzle Kicks. It was. I mean, I was called Rizzle Kicks just on my own.
Sure.
And I put this up with Harley, and then suddenly all of our mates are like, "Wow!" I was like, "I've put up 4 other songs last year," but now the second I did it with Harley, it's just a whole different. And then I looked at him. He looked at me. Thought, why not?
This works.
Yeah, why not? And also, it added another dimension. And
did you know it added another dimension? Did you? I mean, did you think, oh, this we work together really well?
Only once people had.
So you needed the reaction for you to
kind of. It was just fun before.
And this minor breaches of discipline is the first sort of tape that you put together.
God, that is some serious research.
But that's you. That's your lines with Harley singing.
Harley features very briefly on Minor Breach of Discipline, which is like quite a rogue mixtape I did when I was about 17. But yeah, Harley's on there a little bit. That was wild. Yeah, that was me plugging away at
you really were plugging. You had a very kind
things.
you had a very, I don't know what the word is, not quite a workaholic attitude to things, but a really work ethic.
Yeah, I was a go-getter. I am a go-getter.
You still are a go-getter.
Yeah, a little less so though.
Sure. Well, because you can, I suppose it's about choices again, isn't it? Rather than feeling that you have to rush through whatever doors are open.
Yeah.
But this door opened quite quickly. You start uploading your daily kicks.
Yeah.
Your online presence builds up.
Yeah.
5 demo tracks by 2010.
Yeah.
And the video for what would become Down with the Trumpets went massive.
Yeah.
What did that feel like? Did you feel like this is... Because there's a difference between aiming for something and believing that it's possible, but you seem always to have believed. You talked about your parents, friends growing up. It didn't feel like a world, in a way that when you were in Japan, that felt like a world that you had no right being in. Yeah. You never felt that about the entertainment industry.
Yeah, you know what? I think the greatest encapsulation of my delusion was arriving at that moment of, in 2011, July 2011, I think it was, we snuck into the charts at 144, and by the end of that, we were 8, and our life just, flipped on its head, and we were 8 for like maybe 2 months. We were around for Trumpets really stuck around. But I do remember thinking, yep.
That's it now.
Yeah. No, I just that makes sense. We did that.
The most natural thing in
works.
the world. We put a penny in that slot and this came out.
And it happened. Which now it's actually become a real issue. It really gave me quite a complex in going into my mid-20s. Just to your first attempt, my first attempt at engaging with mainstream music, and it worked. That's not normal.
So the struggle might have been an easier thing to process if there'd been more struggle.
100%. People thought we were manufactured. People thought we were industry plants, because we were gigging to 40 people in a basement in Brighton, and then we put up a video. And by the way, Trumpets has been on our MySpace for about 9 to 10 months.
Right.
We put a visual to it, and then bang. Record deal, everyone loves it. Then we Radio 1 hear the song, pick it up as record of the week, and then just as quickly as we all shared that experience, the public, us, everyone was like, where did this come from? We don't know. But yeah, a complex ensued because I've tried something once and it happened. So now in my head, that's how it works. Yeah. Which is not how it works, by the way, if anyone was wondering.
So we've now reached, and this is why I mentioned at the beginning that you're a bit younger than the average guest on Full Disclosure, because we've now reached the period of your life where you become a public figure, where you are known. And I mean, people who perhaps needed a bit of help grasping how quickly things went bonkers, Stephen Fry by July of 2011 was tweeting about how he was unexpectedly loving the old school hip hop sounds of Rizzle Kicks.
Shout out Stephen Fry every time. Shout out Stephen Fry. But he was one of our first advocates, man. Shout out Stephen Fry.
And you start playing festivals, you become a star, not just in a studio and not just on YouTube and not just on MySpace.
Yeah,
you're on big stages with people that you'd have been listening to.
Yeah, literally.
Months, weeks previously, like Dizzy Rascal or Mike Skinner, and suddenly you're there.
Yeah.
Did you have the space to enjoy it?
It was just a complete whirlwind.
Yeah.
Everyone says it, man. Yeah. Everyone says it. Like, if it happens in the early 20s, if this really is the main kickoff engagement, I just don't understand how somebody can really be in their body during that time. I'm sure people are. You'd have to find someone who is or was, but I can, if I really sit and think of certain moments, yes, I can connect to my body then and think, wow, that is incredible. But there was a lot of shock, a lot. And you're so right to say that. Like, I've really stressed to people, one thing that encapsulates it is one of our first ever public events, one of these schmoozy events we went to, was for a game, right? Yeah. And the reason why I say it was for a game is it brought together every kind of entertainment. So you had reality stuff. It was the birth of Towie, so you had all the Towie people there. You had footballers, you had whatever. Footballers, right? I had played FIFA religiously. I had played FIFA that evening before with Daniel Sturridge as one of the people I was controlling. And I've gone the next day and he's looking at me from across this room and he's like, Rizzle Kicks. What? I couldn't compute.
No,
I remember
too much.
Stephen Graham.
Yeah.
Stephen Graham said, I love your stuff. You know,
Yeah.
a massive Shane Meadows, one of my favourite directors. You know, and he's one of his biggest collaborators. Blown away.
So it's not even. It'd be too simplistic to say that you're feeling unworthy. You're just feeling completely, utterly blown away.
Blown away. And I'm not afraid to lean into the unworthy thing because, again, one of the earliest complexes I remember was with fandom.
Right.
I'd come out, 20, 21, 22. We'd perform at a show. Obviously, we're total hedonists at the time. We'd be drinking afterwards, whatever, smoking afterwards. We'd come out 4 hours later from this venue, and there'd be a mum with their kid, a dad with their kid. And I remember being like, "What are you doing?"
Yeah.
I just
wanting a selfie, wanting a picture with you, wanting an autograph.
Yeah, of course. And instead of listen, I've brushed shoulders with some incredible pop stars, and that's easy work for them. Yeah. That's their job. Yeah. A pop star is a separate job. They go out, "Oh, thank you for coming. Here's a thing." Da, da, da. I'm there going, I'm not that exciting and important. I'm a very confused, lost soul. Why are you waiting here?
What do you want from me? What am I? How am I going to help?
Yeah.
And 21 is the age at which I think you discover medication, as it were.
Yeah. 22. Yeah.
It could, in quite strange circumstances, in that someone gives you some Adderall, which is an ADHD medication. You don't consult any doctors for quite a long time, as far as I could tell. You get back here, you self-medicate with mushrooms and cocaine before you start swapping your cocaine for modafinil, an ADHD medication. But the consequence of you not troubling any doctors with this process is that you end up taking far too much of it, really. The doses that you're taking are enormous.
Yeah. So that was an interesting journey. My drug abuse definitely peaked with cocaine because I now realise I was medicating my ADHD, and when I was going out and doing it with everybody in London, of central London, it's funny. Sorry, this is a complete side note, but you did mention in one of your shows recently about stop and searches, and I always find that conversation so funny because if police were serious about stop and searches, I can tell them confidently where they could find people with Class A drugs.
You're stealing one of my lines. You'd be dangling people by their ankles in Mayfair and King's Road, wouldn't you? I mean, you would not be knocking around Peckham, chucking kids over the bonnet of police cars.
Anyway. Anyway, but yeah, so I was doing that, and that was the being out wasn't the issue. It was going home and then suddenly writing these scripts or making these songs, and I was kind of showing them to people. I wasn't afraid of that. I'd be like, "Hey, look at the script I've done," but they wouldn't know that I'd done half a gram or gram of coke the night before. I started to realise it was a bit of an issue.
Yes.
Actually, mushrooms came a lot later. Mushrooms is I'd consider a medicine more than a drug.
Yeah.
But yeah.
You're your mother's son, aren't you?
Yeah. Well, but so I did that, and then when I was in New York with a friend of mine, everybody's on meds in New York, and I'm not sure this person even had ADHD, but they gave me some Adderall, and I suddenly was given this surreal experience where I was having thoughts come to the forefront of my mind and then stop, and then I was able to think about whether or not I wanted to say them. And I didn't realise I could do that. That was the level of my impulsivity to that point, was that I didn't realise I could actually consider what I was saying until,
I'd often wonder about that, whether until something like that happens, you don't really know what words like neurodivergent and neurotypical mean. So this Adderall gave you a kind of holiday in a neurotypical world.
Yeah. No, I actually asked one of my friends, I said to my friend, like, I don't mean to sound stupid, but when you have a thought, do you decide whether or not you say it? And they were like, yes. And I was like, wow. I hadn't even considered that. I thought if someone wasn't saying something, they just weren't thinking anything. And then, I would often have to deal with the consequences of my words afterwards. So I ended up self-medicating upon realising that would take me from the cocaine.
Okay.
With this thing, modafinil, I thought, well, that'll be healthier because it is a recognised...
Why didn't you go to the doctor? Is that...
Because I don't know, man. Like, someone suggested it to me.
You thought you didn't need to. I've got this covered.
Well, what happened was it was actually a hacker friend of mine.
Yeah.
Who I'll tell you what, if you want to find out about black market drugs, speak to hackers.
Thank you, Jordan, but I have no interest in
But and it, they were calling it the limitless drug at the time, and I tried it and listen, I made a lot. I wrote a lot again. I was very, very, very productive to a fault, I'd say. And it was only when I got officially re-diagnosed because of a TV show, I was given a psych exam. And it was during that re-evaluation where I was asked if I was medicating, and I was like, yes, I'm medicating on modafinil. They went, okay, that's a recognised medication. How much are you taking? And I said, I'm taking 2 tablets a day. And he said, how many are the tablets? How strong are the tablets? I said 200 milligrams. And I remember him pausing, and being like, I'm going to prescribe you something else. It's called Concerta XL, and I'm going to put you on this dosage. And I remember looking at the box it was in, and it was 16 milligrams. 16. And I remember thinking, 16? I want 400 of And then when I read through the pamphlet and it was explaining an overdose, that was actually what I experienced most days when I thought the drugs were kicking in.
It's extraordinary, isn't it?
Yeah.
And the realisation as well, and quite lucky in a way to get the intervention you got when you did.
Yeah.
Because I don't know where it goes. Where does that lead, doing 400 milligrams every day for indefinitely? Where does that go? Where does that lead?
I do think it would have maybe had an effect on my dopamine production, natural dopamine production. Forever. I don't know. I mean, I do know that it wasn't long after reworking my medication that this heartbreak happened. So
yes.
I wonder how much of an effect that played into the depth of the feeling.
And we arrive now at the heartbreak, at Avoidance, Drugs, Heartbreak and Dogs, which is a unique book and quite a hard book to describe. How did you describe it? Where did it come from? I know I'll do a bit of précis in that you were in a 2-year relationship. You betrayed your girlfriend, your then girlfriend, and you told her, and everything fell to pieces. And you reached a point where you wanted to examine every single bone and sinew of this 4-year period of your life. At the moment, I'm not thinking that publishers are going to bite your arm off when you approach them with this idea. So where did the idea come from? And albeit that by now you're a successful children's author, you've published a children's book, and you have, your profile as half of Rizzle Kicks. So where did the idea for this very specific book come from? And how did you then explain to other people what it was, or did you wait until you'd finished before you showed it to
so the heartbreak I experienced, it was actually the relationship ended up being a little longer, but the initial period of the relationship was 5 months, which was the end came at the expense came as a result of my own betrayal. And then I was honest, and then I was rightly left, but what happened as a result, and why I felt it would be interesting to write about, was my own emotional experience of it, my unconscious experience of it didn't necessarily play into what is right, or the ideas of there was a moral ambiguity there where I've done wrong, I've been left, but that's tapped into this kind of deep-rooted abandonment issue that I had been, I guess, sitting on the whole time. And it felt like this final moment that broke this dam inside me, and I ended up having to process other griefs that I had ignored, notably my grandmother's passing, and other relationships where I had come to terms with my own actions because I just numbed myself or moved on or seeked validation elsewhere. The reason I wrote the book was because during this heartbreak I wrote an article for The Guardian about masculinity, because this all happened right at the peak of Me Too. And that experience was quite surreal because I was seeing a lot of online conversation and this kind of outpouring, this what's the word where they talk about it in ceremonies a lot, where it's purging. It felt like a purge. And I thought, man, I understand, I can see myself in some of these stories, obviously not the extreme ones, but definitely in patterns of behaviour or neglect. I felt a lot of this. So I thought, let me write about that. Let me write about this. And at the time, I was so sad that I'd let go of my persona. I kind of guess I'd let my guard down, because what else was there to lose? At that point in my life, I felt like I was at rock bottom. I genuinely did. So I remember I was staying at my uncle's, I wrote this article and I've shown it to him. What do you reckon think about this? He went, I think you should try and get it published. I thought, whatever. I honestly thought, whatever. Sent it to a couple of mates. They helped me edit it a little bit, put it out. And I remember getting an email from Guardian being like, we're going to run this on Monday morning. I think it's going to have some traction, because it was literally a hot button topic.
Yeah, of course.
It goes viral because I guess just being a boy, or I guess being a man, a young man, even challenging some conventional concepts around masculinity was just seen as an exciting thing.
Yeah.
But the kind of poetic tragedy of it was the response I got because of this industry was very much, would you like to write a book? Do you want to write a film?
Right, okay.
Do you want to do a documentary? Do you want to? Yeah. And I remember thinking, I was like crying in a car park thinking, wow, every opportunity I wanted has been offered to me now, because I've written 700 words, but from a place of a pure desire to just to process or survive what I'm feeling, you know? And so that opportunity from that point had always been there. I subsequently got a book agent, and I was always asked, do you want to write something about men? Do you want to write something about men? And I thought, no, because I don't know what to say. I don't feel like I know enough. And it was actually only from getting into a more stable relationship that I've been able to approach from a certain level of emotional maturity, where I've spoken to male friends of mine and I'm always referring to that point. This is what happened during this heartbreak. These are the paths I went on. So I started writing about it.
And that, I mean, you've made it sound inevitable. You've made it sound something that you needed to do, and something that's also part of the therapeutic process. But it's neither of those things. It's not something that you necessarily needed to do, and it wouldn't necessarily prove to be part of the therapeutic process. Am I understanding it correctly then, if I say that it's as if you felt completely broken and you couldn't rebuild until you knew what all the pieces were?
Yeah. In terms of being able to write the book.
Yeah. The pieces.
It was having enough. First, it was having enough distance from the experience, for sure. And then it was feeling, once I've entered into a relationship where I was able to be emotionally available and make commitments, and and I've started to feel this love.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm now secure enough to delve back into a moment where I didn't feel like that was available.
Would the crisis have happened in different circumstances? Because, I mean, it's more, I think, if you can't quite understand that she won't forgive you. I mean, and you don't come out of it well a lot of the time. It's very unrelenting. I mean, this podcast is called Full Disclosure, but my goodness me, this book is warts and all, barely touches the sides. But it occurred to me, and I haven't read all of it, I haven't had it for long enough, but it occurred to me that the catalyst for the collapse could have been something else. It could have been... Yeah,
of course. I really believe that's one of the main lessons I learned from this whole journey I've been on around, again, I've been very lucky to do therapy.
Yeah.
I've been on emotional trauma retreats. One of the only real names I choose to use in the book in its entirety is Donna Lancaster, because I want everybody to Google her, because she is an incredible woman who ran a course called The Bridge, which I was very lucky to go on.
Yeah.
But yes, emotion, I now understand, is a physical experience, a physical reality, and if I'm not processing that emotion, it's building up inside me.
And that's where the evangelism comes in. So this is a book that you have written to help yourself, but you have published it to help other people.
What do you mean by evangelism? What's that? I don't understand that as a...
Like spreading the word.
Oh, okay.
Spreading the power of therapy. So it comes from like the gospel. So,
I get that.
So that's evangelist.
Yeah, I do feel a slight duty. Yeah, I do actually. Yeah,
because the change that doing the work, the change it has made to you, makes you want to scream it from the rooftops in a way that this could help other people too.
I remember going through that heartbreak and feeling as if there wasn't that much for me to guide me, and I'm sure I say this and I worry sometimes that of course there's going to be incredible books, shows, plays, TV shows that I haven't seen, but just in my experience I wanted something a little bit more,
So what were you looking for when you say that you couldn't find the guidance that you wanted? You couldn't find books on masculinity, you couldn't find books on male puberty, but what were you looking for? Were you looking for a manual? You were looking for something that would help you understand why you felt so shit? Listen,
I don't. It's tough because I obviously haven't explored or read all the books.
Oh, I know, but what were you looking for? Whether it existed or not, you didn't.
I was looking for a real truthful depiction of what going through heartbreak felt like. I hadn't been told it by any man around me. I hadn't been given an understanding of what that was. My understanding of young men maturity was, I guess, at a reach, the in-betweeners, at a stretch. That was like the nearest I had to sometimes boys masturbate, sometimes boys fall in love and they're heartbroken and they cry about it and it's funny. That was my understanding.
This is a space then I mean.
Well, it's I hate using the term because it falls in heteronormative is the term I use.
Sure.
But it's just to really, like, it's just about heartbreak, man. I wanted to know why that felt at the time like the worst thing in the world when it's something that every single person will go through.
And that is what's so extraordinary about the whole thing, is that I don't think there is a great canon of work that you've just not encountered because of the journey.
Really?
No, I really don't think that there is space where men do this stuff very often. I wrote, I was just on our A-level, so I can actually work it out quite closely. 19 years ago, I wrote about fertility treatment from the man's point of view.
Oh, right.
I still get messages now.
Yeah, I bet.
From people who go online looking for something about being infertile from a man's point of view.
I bet.
And they go, this is the only piece I could feel. I wrote it for the Daily Mail.
Do you know what I mean, though?
No, so I don't think it does exist.
I felt like there was just an air of secrecy around these experiences.
Secrecy, shame?
Shame, massive one. Massive. Just again, like, even talking about penises in our modern culture, or just talking about sex and it's so much more nuanced in my I really believe that a male experience of sex, for example, is a lot more nuanced than we give credit for because of the more toxic representations of it that are shoved in our faces. I think it's a lot more nuanced than that, and so I wanted to bear what I could because I really think that it would help somebody who felt ashamed, for example, of what they were feeling.
And I suppose in some ways all of the things that you've gone through, not just the heartbreak, are the qualifications that you have for this role. Which brings us back in a way to why you leave. It's a 4-year story.
Yeah, kind of. It covers 5 months and there's a big jump.
Which reaches back and reaches forward.
Yeah,
but the 5 months of what we could loosely describe as misery.
Yeah.
It works in isolation, doesn't it? It works as and you jump around a heck of a lot. Just as a writer, I'm interested in what the process was. Did you just churn it all out and then try to knit it together afterwards, or did you have an idea when you started of?
I had a structure.
The beginning, the middle, and the end.
Yeah,
you did.
I did. That was one of the most pivotal moments for me. I sat down with a mate of mine called Adam, and he is an incredible playwright. And my main barrier for a long time was understanding structure, and the 5 months gave me.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It gave me that scaffolding, and I was able to tie other things in, and then to be honest, for example, the theme itself. I didn't sit down and go, let me explore ADHD.
No.
I was like, let me explore heartbreak, and it just became clear that that the way I looked at life, and certainly the way I wrote about life, was through a lens that people would identify as ADHD. And so when it came to describing the book, that's kind of where I went down.
I don't want anyone listening to think that this book won't be of interest to them because they don't have ADHD.
Yeah, no, it's not at all.
No, I know that, and you know that.
Yeah.
But I just want to stress that it's about the universal experiences
of
that
heartbreak.
are largely unrecorded. So I could give you a Shakespeare sonnet now,
yeah,
which is supposedly about heartbreak.
Yeah.
But it wouldn't, and it's a beautiful piece of work, and it's a brilliant. And you could quote something back at me. You could quote, but to just. What is it that you've done? You've dug so deeply into your own pain that's the bit that's arresting to me. And you've done it to understand why you did some fucking stupid things, and ended up in some very stupid places, but also to. Well, I mean, I guess in the first instance, just to understand it, and by understanding it, you free yourself.
There is a certain level of freedom, and there's also, I just think I have this understanding that what people conceive as pain, or perhaps being slightly brutal, or whatever words to be used in terms of how I excavate myself, I just understand that as an opportunity for there to be more connection, you know? Like, I really want there to be a connection between me and a reader. And you're right, the ADHD it's a very loose, you know, it binds it together because I get to have a fun acronym, but it's not exclusive at all, you know?
It's I mean, women would benefit from reading it as well as men. The things, all of the people I can think of that are working in this area from a female perspective.
Yeah.
And yet I would struggle to come up with two names now that are trying to do this from the male perspective, except the toxic sort of, the promoters of a form of toxic masculinity, which you're at great pains. As a side effect of what you've done, you offer up an antidote to all that sort of thing. How are you feeling right now at the prospect of it finally going out into the world? Because it's and your girlfriend, and you talk about probably you needed to be in the love that you write beautifully about love. You write about warm bread. You write about really lovely stuff. But people would expect that from someone who's been writing all their life, as successfully as you have, as effectively as you have. You were worried that she would read some of this stuff, and you're worried about her reaction.
Of course, yeah. I mean, my girlfriend is, you know, a human being who is incredibly sensitive and creative herself and wonderful, and I needed to focus on finishing, getting it across the line. And listen, I'll put it like this, you know, I got to the point where I wanted her to read it. She was one of the first readers, of course.
Yeah, sure.
And it was on a pile in the kitchen, and she would come in every evening because we were quite busy at that time, and the pile would become shorter and shorter, smaller and smaller. She wouldn't ever say anything. She just boom, 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 boom. No feedback, James. Like, honestly, like, this is over days. So I'm there like thinking, what? And she went, okay, I finished. And what do you think? And she went, here are the bits I loved. And just had taken pictures of all the paragraphs that she loved. And I was just like, oh, dude. And she's written me a message this morning, and I almost cried on the tube, man. Honestly, this woman is like, I'm just feel incredibly grateful to be in a relationship with her, and for her to support me through, you know, for people who do read the book, like you said, well, as you've alluded to, you know what I mean? There are challenging topics. There's a real dissection of self, and she is, you know, she just poured love into it and went, yeah, great, proud of you.
Unrelenting.
Yeah.
And unrelentingly exploring yourself, but the nature of manhood, the nature of modern masculinity. So I'll ask you that question again. How are you feeling about it going out into the world now? Because you write it in a room and in a space in your own head, and then it's
out.
It's out.
You know, the early feedback I've had, fortunately, has been lovely. Yeah. And I guess
I'm not surprised by that, but I am. I mean, it doesn't take away from you've exposed yourself.
Yeah, I have. That bit's scary. Yeah. And when I hear it back from people, that's not going to get easy. I'll be like, yep, I guess I have. But I did tell myself from the beginning that I wanted it to be beyond my persona right now. It's hard to say that without sounding wanky, but it's like
you want it to take on a life of its own.
Yes, I do. I really do, and I don't want to get in the way of that. And if that comes at the expense of, you know, a certain opinion or this perceived, you know, people will not say things in order to maintain some sense of status, or I don't know what, but I'm not bothered about that. I want to get to the nitty gritty. So
there's two brilliant writers quoted on the front just to drive home the point I made about it not being a book for men exclusively by any stretch of the imagination. Necessary, urgent, and totally original by Afua Hirsch. Brutally honest, as well as poetic. Dolly Alderton. What do you do next?
I really, really loved writing the book as a process. I never in a million years thought I could write a whole book. And once I was at 73,000 words, I thought, oh my God, I can suddenly bring to life.
You're over the hump by then.
Yeah.
It's going to happen.
These years of ideas just sat stagnant in my brain. I'm going to find a way of articulating them without barriers. A lot of the time I would imagine I would be writing a TV show or a film. And then now I've realised that in a book I have no restraints. I don't have to think about where it could get shot or who I could convince to act in the show. I can just write the entire wild idea. So I have many fiction ideas I'd love to, you know, that's a real challenge as an author, and there's every chance that's going to be rubbish, but I embrace that challenge of open arms. And listen, like I say, this is 5 months with some back and forth of my life. There are many other aspects of my life that I can dissect. There really are.
That's the geography prize.
I'll tell you what, I could get into that. I could get into,
That's got mini-series written all over it.
Mate, honestly. But yeah, all of those, there will come a time, obviously, it'll be fun to delve into my experiences as a result of the entertainment industry as well. But yeah, man, love is such an important topic for especially young men, not for everybody, obviously, but especially young men at the current time, in this current climate.
I think this is going to blow up, mate. I really do. I think that phone call you took from The Guardian to describe what they thought was going to happen to your article back in the day, I think that's the same sort of thing. The time, the space, the place for it. And we began by alluding to the fact that although you're a little younger than my usual guests, you've managed to cram a lot into your life, but 5 months, a whole book out of just 5 months of your life is a testament to a million things, not least your bravery.
Thanks, James. Yeah, I mean, I hope that's a good word. I'm going to stick with that word.
You never, final question, you never had specific targets, ambitions. We talked a bit about success coming very easily. Do you have any now? The things that you think to yourself. I mean, I know. Look, I'd like to write a novel. To which my late father would always, if I used to say to him, "I'm writing a book, Dad," and he'd always say, "Neither am I, son. Neither am I."
I love that.
Yeah. So,
I love that.
But is there anything measurable that you would like to achieve?
Dude, if I'm being really honest, I really want to be a good father. That's my real dream, man. And I think about it a lot. I've been able to see Harley father 2 children in the absence of Rizzle Kicks, and it just fills me with pride and makes me a little bit emotional thinking about it, to be honest.
I can see that.
But above all, desires creatively and to be an author for the rest of my life and to make music for as long as possible. I would really love to be part of creating some kind of balanced life.
You deserve it. Jordan Stevens, thank you.
James, thanks, man.